Welcome to the GateDrop podcast. GateDrop.com, giving you the jump in motocross news.
Hello and welcome to GateDrop.com and another podcast with myself, Jonathan McCready and Andy McKinstry. For this week's podcast, we're going to have a look back at the EMX250 and EMX125 championships. Some great racing with the young guns, as it were. And Andy, we'll start with the EMX250. Nicholas Lopucci was the dominant factor all year long. Andy was on the Fantic 250, twisting himself into some brilliant shapes over the jumps. But I think he definitely deserves this championship.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good season for Nicholas Lopucci. I mean, obviously coming into it, he had more experience than the other riders. And last year we even seen him in MXGP for a small stint. But even still, you have to deliver. You have to perform well under pressure. And he was able to do just that. I mean, what pressure? And it's also a lot easier when you get the great starts that he was able to get on the two-stroke as well. I have to say, in our preview podcast before the season, I did tip Lopucci for the championship. For you, your prediction went up in smoke after about 2 days later with Jeremy Saido getting injured. But we'll leave it at that.
Don't take joy in rider injuries now.
No, definitely not. Oh, I agree. But I'm just saying, your prediction went up in smoke, and I was right for a change.
Now, he did come back and do quite well at the end of the season. We'll just touch on him quickly before I go back to Lopucci. It looked like the intensity at the front was a bit difficult for him to click into initially because he was getting good starts, but it was a case of what might have been for Jeremy Saido, I think, but he was pretty good coming back. Not easy to come back straight into a class with that much talent.
Absolutely. I mean, he's obviously got a lot of talent, and it was devastating that he got injured before the first round because ever since he's got on the 250, injuries have hindered him quite a lot. So certainly not what the doctor ordered, but at least he was able to come back and show some good things at the end of the season. So it'll be interesting to see what he does now. Rumor has it he's trying to work on an MX2 World Championship ride next year. So maybe we'll see him in MX2. Who knows?
Yeah, the doctor ordered a lot of time off. That's what he ordered. But back to Lopucci. I think as well as the way he rode, obviously he was on the two-stroke, which fans loved, the noise of that bike and how aggressive he was on it. Whether he was dominating or whether he was battling, he was always fun to watch. Even was it Trentino, it was one of the rare races where he just got past, and he was still good to watch scrubbing it over the jumps. With Lopucci, it always looks like he's having so much fun on the bike, but his reaction to winning the championship showed you how serious he took that title and how much he wanted to win it. And this EMX250 European Championship is a big deal these days.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And I mean, make no mistake about it, he was signed by that team to win this championship, so that brings a lot of pressure. But, you know, as we've seen all weekend or all year, he was able just to enjoy himself at every track pretty much. As we've seen with his riding style, throwing it everywhere and anywhere, and he was able to put the bike anywhere he wanted. So really, really impressive. But it was a big sacrifice for him to race this championship this year. It being his last year, you know, he could have raced the MX2 World Championship. So, I mean, it's a good job he won the title because he sort of needed to do that. Otherwise, you know, it could have been a year's loss because obviously MX2 is where everyone wants to be. But the deal that he signed, he made sure that he covered himself, and we'll see him in MXGP next year, and he's going to be riding a 4-stroke Fantic, so that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, do you think the 252 stroke should be allowed in MX2?
I mean, it's in a MX250, so why not? But that's not the issue. The issue is he ages out anyway, but then, yeah, they could sign another rider, I suppose, and put another rider on the bike. So, yeah, possibly.
It's also a good way for maybe privateers, with the 250 being so fast, might be a cheaper option than a 250F. And obviously with a team like Fantic, they have a very good bike. So it could give another couple of riders a very good opportunity to run at the front there. So I would like to see it, but obviously the factory teams, Japanese manufacturers, it wouldn't be, probably wouldn't be as good for them. So EMX 250 looks at the minute that's going to be as far as it goes in terms of 250 two-strokes being allowed in 250 class or MX2 class it is in the World Championship, but I would probably like to see a few 250s out there in MX2 as well.
Yeah, well, like you It's good for the privateers, for people putting wildcard entries in for events, and if they ride a two-stroke, it's good for that. In terms of Matty, at the moment they would probably be the only team that would look to have an MX2 rider on the two-stroke, so it's a difficult one. I mean, there was talk that they could have an MX2 World Championship rider next year anyway, but on a four-stroke. But I don't think that's quite materialised. So we'll only see them racing MXGP and the European Championships again next year. But certainly something to keep an eye on moving forward. Maybe if more teams do what Fantic do and have more two strokes in the EMX250, then maybe that'll be the time to implement it in MX2.
And for Lopucci, we saw the speed he had this year, but he's jumping up 2 steps essentially to go to MXGP. How do you see him doing in that category? We've seen flashes of speed on certain tracks from him before, but a full season of MXGP, and he's obviously adapting back to a 450 four-stroke, so it's going to be a whole new world for Lopucci again.
Yeah, well, he rode some races last year, and I mean, he was battling for points, and I think he might have got a top 15, but after a year in the MX250 class with the Matty Fantic team, he's definitely a lot better now. And in the past, up until this year, really, I would say sand was his weakness. But now, as we've seen this year, he's sort of an all-round rider now. So I think he'll definitely be in the top 15 quite a lot. And on his good days, I don't see why he can't get the old top 10 result.
Yeah, even this title, as you mentioned, he had to deal with pressure and expectation and some good quality competition. So it's maybe give him a little bit extra confidence to be able to deal with under pressure and bring that into the 450 class with a bit of momentum. But as we know, that class is the toughest motorbike series in the world at the minute, so it won't be easy, but hopefully that'll give him maybe a bit more consistency in that class than he's had before when he's attempted it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's going in the MXGP, and in a way, that maybe brings less pressure because he's not going to win the MXGP world title. So as we've seen this year, he was able to forget about the pressure and just go out and enjoy himself. I don't see why he can't do the same in MXGP, and just with the aim of improving himself as a rider. He's still young, he's got a lot of potential, and he should suit the 450. So we'll see. It is the first time that the Matty team will have a rider in the MXGP World Championship on a four-stroke. So it'll be interesting to see how they adapt to that and how competitive the bike is.
Yeah, it's a big deal for Fantic as well, and it's been so far so good for them and what they have done in the MXGP EMX World Championship. So hopefully everything can continue on that path. And I think with Lopucci, they have probably the perfect rider to lead that development.
Absolutely, and also the Matty guys, they couldn't have picked a better team really.
Yeah.
Or I think they're really, really good, and they're especially good at developing young talents as well. I mean, guys like Mario Guardanini. Even Ficchetti was very good for them. They're very good at that, and Lopucci seems to be the latest name that they've been able to help, and they seem to be able to spot weaknesses in riders and help them. So that's a very good trait to have.
So moving on to Kevin Horigbo, he took a step back a little bit like Lopucci from the MX2 category to go with a good team and hopefully try and get a European title. He didn't quite get that European title, but I think the step back has probably worked for him. He won races. He was probably, when you look at the whole season, the guy who could most closely challenge Lopucci for race wins. He took it to the last round. So all in all, for me, Kevin Horigbo, he's been inconsistent in the past, and he was relatively consistent this year. And probably the risk he's taken to step back, for me, would have paid off, and he got to ride some MX2 championship races as well.
Yeah, well, it paid off in the sense that the goal was to get an MX2 World Championship ride for next year. Obviously, nothing's official at the moment, but he has secured an MX2 ride. So, and also he took a step back to have a more competitive bike. So on all fronts, it worked really. Like you say, he's been inconsistent in the past. This year, he was actually very consistent. But I would have liked to have seen him win more overalls, because I feel like an MX2 he might need a little bit more speed. But it will be interesting to see how he makes a step up to MX2. I mean, he's done wildcards before and had top 10 speed, but he's also been 20th as well. So if he can get good consistency in MX2 between the 10 to 15, and then maybe on a good day be a top 10 rider, I think that would be solid for him.
Yeah, and he's been around the top 15 already this year as a kind of gauge. So next year it'll be interesting to see if he can get that, and then, as you said, improve on that and try to become a top 10 rider. So probably a big year for Kevin Horigbo as well. But I think, as we said, this year's probably worked about it almost as well as it could have, aside from actually winning that championship. But Rick Elzinga, I feel he's taken a big step. He was third in the championship, won races, won an overall. He had a bit of a dip there actually in Trentino. France probably wasn't getting the results he wanted. A couple of crashes, and then the last round in Mantova kind of saw that old speed again for Rick Elzinga, an overall third in the series, as we just said, and he has to be pleased with that.
Absolutely, he surprised me a lot this year. To be honest, I know we know that his speed in the sand has always been good, but he's pretty much been an all-round rider this year. Pretty much all conditions, he's performed pretty well at. And if you'd have told me before the season he'd be a consistent podium guy and be third in the championship, I'm not sure I would have agreed with you. So overall, a really good season for him. And it does look like he's going to stay in the EMX250 championship next year. So going into the season, he's probably going to be the title favourite.
Yeah, and a big breakthrough for him, as we spoke to him, and his career was kind of in the balance. And his performances this year, as well as obviously getting points in America, when he looks back, has probably been quite a pivotal year for him.
Yeah, a very, very big year. Like we say, we've always known his speed and sounds good, but he's never really been able to show us what his true potential is because of injuries. So it was a positive just for him to have a full season without any major injuries. And along with that, he was also able to develop his speed and develop as a rider. So overall, a really good season. And it's important for him to build on this now going into next year. And obviously next year, he'll probably be disappointed with anything less than the title, and then hopefully that'll secure him an MX2 ride for 2023.
Yeah, he'll definitely be going in as one of the favourites. Andrea Bonacorsi, his first year in the class, I was expecting possibly a bit more at the start of the year, but by the end of the year, he was where I thought he was going to be, and a consistent front runner. Obviously, his size doesn't make getting off the gate always easiest, but he had a good bike, and I think under the circumstances, he was actually pretty good off the gate by the end of the year. Fourth in the championship for him, couple of race wins, and definitely built upon last year's 125 speed and showed he's going to be a real top rider in the future.
Yeah, I mean, a fantastic year. I have to say, I feel like maybe you expected a little bit too much at the end of the year, because this EMX250 championship, it seems to get stronger and faster at the front every single year. I mean, he was going in off a 125, and you know, Lopucci's he has MXGP experience, Horigbo has MX2 experience, so there's no doubt about it. The speed at the front was very, very fast this year from the get-go, but Bonacorsi was able to get better and better and better, and at the end of the season, he had the speed of them pretty much, as you mentioned, just starts, even though they weren't too bad, you know, he's still not getting hole shots or anything like that. It'd be interesting to see if he was able to get hole shots or even start top three. I think at the end of the year, he probably had the pace of Lopucci and Horigbo. There is talk he could be an MX2 rider for the factory team next year. So if that does materialise, it'll be interesting to see what he can do in MX2 now.
And being on a factory bike should help his starts as well, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Although what I would say is Houghton Metal is a very good bike. So obviously factory's another step up, but then an MX2, the level's also high, and there's also a lot more factory bikes. So yeah, if he does get that factory bike, it'll certainly be interesting.
Yeah, you would think just for his size to go to MX2 on a non-factory bike, he's kind of at a double disadvantage. So he probably needs the factory bike to somewhat even out the starting disadvantage he has. So I think it's probably best for all parties if he has that offer. You can't really turn something like that down.
Absolutely. Well, at the end of the day, he's probably only going to leave that team he's currently with and go to MX2 if he gets a factory ride. So, yeah, I mean, there's been no point in him leaving the team that he has now, getting another year experience in the MX250 to go for the title, unless it was a full factory ride. So, obviously, if that doesn't materialise, he'll probably stay put where he is. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And, you know, Benny Stant, obviously, he had a great year the year before coming into MX2. It'll be interesting to see if Bonacorsi can show the same sort of speed and results in MX2 as he did.
Håkon Fredriksson, this was a turbulent year for the Norwegian, a tough start to the year. Well, actually, the British Grand Prix wasn't too bad. From then, it kind of trended downhill. Then he got off the Bud Kawasaki and onto the Yamaha, and it started going uphill again, and he ended the year really, really strong, 3 second places in a row.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's got on that new bike, and I think he's proved that the problems at the start of the year weren't his fault. So
Yeah.
it was good to see him ride to his true potential. I do feel like he was fast on the Bud Kawasaki. Obviously, not as fast as he ended the season, but he had a lot of issues with that bike. So it was good to see him on the ride of Yamaha, showing us what he can really do. And he ended up winning 2 rounds of the championship actually. So I think he actually ended up winning more than Horigbo did, who finished second. It would have been interesting to see him in that bike from the start of the year. I think he definitely would have been a lot closer, but he's another rider that I think's going to. He told us he's likely to race the MX2 World Championship next year, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do. Obviously, a bit like Bonacorsi, starts could be an issue for Fredericks in MX2 as well, but he's got a lot of speed there, so I feel like he can be maybe similar to what Ferraro was in MX2.
Yeah.
A lot of bad starts, but chasing through the pack like it's nothing.
Yeah, those guys, Fredrickson and Bonacorsi, probably you would see their futures maybe more on the 450 if they can get through MX2 with relative success. Just based on their size, you would imagine that they're going to be good 450 riders.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. But I do feel like a year or 2 years for Fredrickson in MX2 just to gain that little bit of experience. And
Yeah,
obviously
sure.
MX2 is very deep, but it's not as crazy as MXGP is. And then obviously riders will move on or retire from MXGP. So even if he moved up in a couple of years' time, that would be a good move, I feel like. But hopefully he gets a couple of years under his belt in MX2 first, because I definitely feel like he can be a consistent top 10 guy once he figures it out.
What about this guy, Cornelius Tondell? Probably wouldn't have put him sixth in the championship at the end of the season. He's a great ride, starting at the first moto at Matterley Basin in second place. His speed at times was really, really impressive, especially around Trentino, and sixth overall in the championship. I think he actually rode the 450 EMX last year. And to come into this class, we mentioned before, there's a lot of good riders there. And to go sixth with some standout performances, you have to take your hat off to him. And he also incidentally makes it 3 Norwegians in the top 6 in the championship.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. He raced the EMX Open Championship last year. I think he finished fifth in that series. And fast forward a year, and he's just finished sixth in the EMX250 Championship. But sometimes a year on the 450, when a rider's young, can't help their development if they get on a 250 the year after, because they're able just to, they're used to, after using the power of the 450, it makes it a bit easier just to depend it on a 250, I think. But obviously, there's a small window to make that change, and only to have 1 year on the 450. It's not the typical choice.
Yeah.
But Tondell played it well, I think, and I would say he's the most improved rider of the year, in my opinion. Really, really impressive. A couple of podiums, he even won a round. And as you say, in Norway, if these riders keep developing, they could be a serious threat in the Motocross the Nations in 3, 4, or 5 years' time, the way it's going. But Tondell, I believe, is going to stay in the EMX 250 Championship. I believe he tested a Fantic 2-stroke, so they'll be hoping that they can win the title next year with him and have the second title in a matter of years.
And it shows the value of having that MX Open Championship. I know it's early in its development as a class. David De Bartoli, if I said that probably completely wrong, he took the title this year. Nicholas Decor obviously was coming through EMX125 and EMX250 previously, has given him a place to go as well. So I think hopefully that championship will get bigger and bigger, because it's definitely a place for riders to go to develop, as you say, if they want to get their name out in the EMX championship. But the 450 is maybe a cheaper option for them, and then that could get them a ride in EMX 250 or even MX2, or probably more likely onto 450 and MXGP. But there's definitely a place for that class now.
Absolutely, yeah. I was a fan whenever they announced the championship. Obviously, this has been the second year of it, and as we've seen in the past with championships, they tend to get stronger and stronger every year. So hopefully next year it can even be better and have a bit more depth in the series too. And all being well, it'll be in the paddock for many years, because it does give riders like that a chance. And even if somebody is too old for MX2 or EMX250, but they're not quite good enough for MXGP, if they do the EMX Open, then that should help the depth of the class as well, with young riders as well.
And with COVID and stuff, it hasn't been the easiest couple of years to try and build a new class. So hopefully from next season that will, as you say, create more entries, create more rider depth, because it definitely has a lot of potential. There's a bit of a void from when you go MX2 under 23 into MXGP. There's a lot of riders can get lost in that transition. So hopefully that will be another valid and prestigious European Championship, the way the EMX125 and EMX250 is. Okay, back to EMX250 and Liam Everts, 7th overall, but that doesn't reflect how he was riding this year. He was 4th until he had that crash in Mantova that meant he couldn't finish the season with shoulder injury from memory. And obviously with he's going to MX2 next year, so they didn't want to take any risk. You want to get that healed because the off-season isn't that long this year. But Everts was really coming on strong, especially in Trentino. He was going for that podium and he had a pretty hard crash off a downhill, landed on his head. Fortunately, that one he actually walked away from. But Everts' starts not the best all year, but showed he could start working his way through. And when he did get a top 5 start, he was a podium contender. Didn't often get a shot at the win. The Oz was probably the only time he was really leading with a chance to win. And he was a wee bit nervous, but pretty understandable when it was your first big moment at the front. And a lot of fans, Belgium obviously not far away, so a lot of home fans there for him as well. But overall, I think Everts has taken big steps this year and really proven himself on the 250. Also, his nation's experience and an MX2 ride where he got points as well. So a huge year in Liam Everts' development for me.
Yeah, big year. He took a lot of strides this year. Obviously, it was his first full year in the MX250 Championship. I know the year before he was doing the MX250 that didn't collide with the EMX125 rounds, but this is his first full year at it. And like you say, he was 4th before his injury. It's a shame the injury cost him 3 positions in the championship, but definitely a good year. And I just love the kid's style. He's probably the best rider to watch in that class, especially when the tracks get really rough and gnarly. He's able to use the wonderful Everts technique that he has. And yeah, it's great to see. One question for you. Do you think it's the right decision to go to MX2 next year, or would you like him to stay in the MX250 Championship and really push for the title?
It is quite quick just to have one proper year in that class. And also he was injured, quite a badly broken wrist in the EMX125 year that he was leading. But Liam's development is kind of later because he didn't start racing till later. So I think he's 17 now. He turned 17 at the end of the season. Yeah. So he probably doesn't have much room to play with. If, the younger guys start racing at 5, 6 and then they're 15, 16, he'll be 18 then by the end of next season. I think he's shown enough speed to show he can cut it in MX2. And he could probably the option still to go back if he really has to, but like Horigbo. But I think it's not bad. He's got a good team next year. He'll obviously have Stefan with him who can guide him. And I think with the speed he's shown, to me, he's still on his upward development, and that's going quickly because of how limited race experience he has. It's only really the last, 3 years he's been really, really serious with racing and at EMX level. And each year he's taken big leaps in his progression. It's probably a slight risk, but then it's also a risk if you stay in EMX 250 and you regress as well. So maybe you're just better. He's proven his speed. He's raced against very fast riders. He's tested the water in MX2. To me, I think he's ready for it. And another winter, he'll make another step.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad decision. And when you get a team that's interested in you to ride MX2 all around, you sort of have to take it. I just feel like if it was me, I just feel like maybe one more year in the EMX250 Championship and then maybe do the MX2 rounds that don't clash. Because I feel like he'd definitely be with a shot at the title next year, and he would. And I do think he still would have developed a lot in the MX250 Championship and racing MX2 alongside it. But yeah, the decision's been made that he'll go to MX2, so it will be interesting. I just worry it probably won't happen. He'll probably adapt fine and he'll get plenty of top 10 results. But sometimes when riders make a quick step to MX2 and you're finishing 16th, 17th, 18th, it's not great for the confidence. So if that does happen and a few motos here or there, it'll be interesting to see how he handles that.
I think for Liam, just on his style, to me, he's the closest thing to Jorge Prado in terms of his technicality. Obviously, size-wise, they aren't far apart either, but they're just so precise on the bike. They're doing a lot of technical, smooth things on the machine that rarely look ragged. He's kind of the next thing of Prado in terms of that style of rider, which, as you mentioned, that's how Stefan was his rider, and clearly Liam has that, A, the ability, and B, the ability to listen and learn to what Stefan's saying in terms of his technique. So I think he has all that sorted. And whenever you have all that sorted, it should allow your speed to come easier, which is probably one of the reasons he's able to ride and then develop year on year so quickly. But to your point about MX2, I think the starts are going to be huge for him. If this bike, I think it's factory bike, isn't it? He's going to be on
Satellite, so I don't think it'll be full factory, but he'll certainly be getting some sort of factory support. Yeah.
Yeah, you would imagine he'll have some bits and parts on that. I think he'll need the starts to try and be competitive in that top 10. If he's going to be coming from the back each round, it's going to be difficult, as you said, mentally, because even if he's feeling he's riding well, the results on paper aren't going to be there to legitimize that in his head. So I think starts are going to be crucial. If he can get those starts, I think he'll be fine because he'll be able to adapt to the pace. As we saw actually already in the rounds he's done, he was following Muse pretty closely for one of the rounds as well. And we've seen Muse has top 5 speed when he gets away. But the other side is there's a lot of these guys coming through into MX2 next year, so it's not like the class is going to be easier if Renault leaves and Jed Beaton leaves and Wilson Todd leaves. There's going to be guys coming in to replace that, and it's already pretty deep. So I think starts for Liam to get the results that he's probably capable of, the starts are going to be crucial for him.
Yeah, I agree with you actually, and yeah, mentioning Jorge Prado there, I think you're right. He's probably the closest thing coming through in terms of Prado style, but he wouldn't mind Prado starts to go with it. If he could get that bit nailed, it'd be sorted, wouldn't he?
He might need to go and practice the Prado in Spain in January, just to have a wee look at what his technique is coming off that gate. Because if Liam could get those starts, that would save him a few months' work over the next year.
Exactly. But starting like Prado, Prado's probably the best starter I've ever seen in the history of the sport, so it doesn't come easy.
No, he's the only one that's been able to do that consistently. Jeff Emig was a great starter, and he knew how to move over on people as well and hold his line. But Prado, I think he's the new benchmark for that one. But moving on, Iago Martinez, 8th overall in the series. He had some really good rides, and then some rides that he probably didn't want to have, but overall 8th. I think that's pretty good for him, and he's shown a lot of potential moving forward.
Yeah, he really, really, really impressed me this year. I mean, this is his first full year racing the EMX250 championship. Mm-hmm. He had done rounds before, and I mean, like, I don't even think he scored points. So for him to get 8th in the championship, very, very impressive. And I'm surprised, to be honest, he's not staying with the team he's currently at. They've decided to part ways, so he's currently looking for a ride, but hopefully somebody will snap him up soon. Obviously, he's 20 now, so he's not, he's the same age as Jorge Prado. For whatever reason, they delayed this decision to race the MX250 championship full time until this year, but it's certainly done him the world of good. And if he can show the same improvement that he's shown coming into this year and the next year, he could be a contender for that title.
And Emil Wickman and Mike Wood, decent seasons for them. Wickman obviously was an EMX150 graduate, as it were. And he had a good ride at the Motocross of Nations as well. So solid for him. Missed 3 rounds as well, but came on strong at the end of the year. Again, this class is quite start dependent for those guys at the bottom end of the top 10. If they get away, they can ride more or less in that top 5. Mike Guerda as well. When he got away, showed good flashes of speed. But it's not easy even to get top 10 in this class. It's really, really deep. And I think they have to be pleased with ending the year inside the top 10, 9th and 10th.
Yeah, absolutely. Wickman, I think it's difficult for him probably on that bike. It's not the best bike out of the gate, but that team has decided to close its doors, so he'll be on the move for next year. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of deal he has. I do know Honda rate him, so I imagine he'd probably be on a Honda team, but we'll have to see in that one. Mike Guerder is a rider that interests me actually. He continues to improve every single year. Last year, he missed a lot of racing. This was basically his first full year at it. And whenever he wasn't getting took out by other riders, he was certainly up there at the sharp end. And 10th is pretty much a rookie, is impressive, I think. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of step he can make over the winter and if he can get close to the top 5 next year.
Oriol Olivier, if that's how you say that, he was really good as well in certain moments, and especially at the end of the year. 2 third places in Italy, the penultimate round at Mantova. Really impressive for him. And Maxime Gros, a wee bit up and down, but you had to expect that. He's really young. Straight on to an EMX250 with not much time on a 125. Again, he had moments of speed, especially when he got the start. He showed speed, probably just missing strength and time, really. But I expect next year he's going to come to the forefront of this class.
Yeah, just on Olivier, he had a similar season to Fredrickson in terms of he started the season with a team in the form of Guadelli, Yamaha. Every one of their riders actually left the team, so not sure what was going on there. But once he signed with the WZ KTM team, took him a while to get up to speed. But like you say, he ended the season really fast, and he's a young Spaniard to keep an eye on. I feel like with a hard winter and that team behind him, he could turn some heads next year potentially. And Maxime Gros, I mean, at Mallory Basin, he blew me away in the first moto, fourth,
Yeah, he's really
unbelievable.
good.
He never really reached those heights again, but there was a lot of sand riding there, and this winter was the first time he's seen sand like that. So if he just keeps doing his thing, he will certainly progress a lot. 12th overall in the championship is still very good. And he's made a lot of progress. It was quite funny on his Insta story the other day, I think it was, him standing beside the Wolf and Van der Moosdijk, and he's just so small. So he could do a growing over the winter.
Oh, he growth spurt as well. Anyone else? Hi.
Just
Talvico with a couple of good rides as well.
Yeah, just on the disappointment really.
Oh, it's very negative.
Talvico and VTEC. Expected a lot of those two coming into the season. For whatever reason, it just didn't really work out. But Talvico especially is still one rider a rate, so it'll be interesting to see where he ends up next year. It's after finishing 6th as a rookie last year, finishing 19th was definitely not on his cards. But hopefully he can have a strong winter and we can see the best of him next year. And Vitek, for whatever reason, just seems to struggle with the 4-stroke. Put him on a 2-stroke and he's top 5 or top 10. So I'm not sure if that's just a mental issue, but hopefully he can get another chance and we can see his full potential. And then another rider I'd like to touch on is Ralph Mason. Wasn't too long ago until he had a lot of potential. He was showing his potential. Injuries and stuff made things difficult, and obviously this year was difficult for him. But at the end there, he was able to show some good pace. I think he was running 3rd or 4th in a moto before he crashed, which was a bit of a shame, but he looked comfortable at the front. So hopefully he can stay fit, have a strong winter, and come out swinging next year and show his full potential.
Right, let's move on to EMX125. This class was pretty exciting all year. A lot of young kids with a lot of wide open throttle at times. And the guy who ended up winning it, Valerio Lata, was probably the most consistent and calmest rider who was able to weather the storms in his individual motos to come out as champion. And we saw his joy at doing that. And it again underlines just how important these championships are for these young riders. But Lata has added the MX125 title to his 85 success, and he's clicking away at becoming a Grand Prix rider in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very talented, and he deserves that championship. Really good season for him. It is a shame Osterhagen got injured because he was riding phenomenal at the start of the year, and it looked like for all the world he was going to win the title. But in the end, injury meant he'd never. But we'll see him in the EMX250 championship next year, along with Lata. But it's an interesting one actually, because Lata was probably riding harder and maybe even better when Osterhagen was there because he needed to push more. But as soon as he was injured, he just played the consistency card to bring home the championship, and you can't blame him for that. The championship was the prize that he wanted at the end of the day, and he was able to deliver. But it'll be interesting to see what he can do in the MX250 championship next year when he has to push every single week.
Just on Osterhagen, if anybody forgot, he only really done the first 2 rounds before he broke his leg, but he won 3 of the 4 motos. And if you want to remind yourself just how good he was riding, go back and watch those races, because he was pretty much on another level to anyone else at that point in the season. How that will have developed in later rounds, we don't know. But I'll be keeping a really good eye on him next year in the EMX250 class, because he looked this year a pretty special talent.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And another Norwegian coming up through the ranks.
Exactly.
So whatever they're doing is certainly working. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this injury will have affected him. But hopefully he can be back on the bike soon and he can have a full winter. We can see him and Lata bang bars in the MX250 next year.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to see how he goes, because he really, really impressed me at the first 2 rounds. The control he had of the bike, the style he had on the bike. He wasn't even the tallest, but he was pretty much able to do whatever he wanted on that Fantic. And again, with Fantic, we're showing this progression as well. They're able, very good at choosing good riders.
Absolutely, yeah, they are indeed. I mean, coming into the year, I know in our preview show we thought Lata or Osterhagen were the 2 main men coming into the season, but I'm sure a lot of casual fans probably didn't even know who Osterhagen was coming into the season. So he certainly opened eyes at the first couple of rounds, and very, very talented. So it'll be interesting to see what he and also Lada can do, because he is also very talented as well. They don't give out EMX85 or EMX125 titles for free. You certainly have to work hard for them. So Lada's next step will be, can he add an EMX250 title to it?
Yeah, there'll be a lot of teams keeping their eye on those two next season. Bobby Bruce, second overall. Really good season for Bobby. He showed his speed at the very first round in Britain, but crucially for a British rider, he showed that speed on the continent as well, and he was good in every condition. A couple of crashes here and there, and then a pretty cruel DNF in the first moto at the final round cost him any remaining chance he had of putting pressure on Lata. But second overall, he put everything into it. A very good season for Bobby Bruce.
Yeah, and that's actually a very good point you've just made there, with a British rider being able to show his speed outside England and all around Europe. And Bobby was able to do that this year. Very, very impressive, I have to say. Really, really consistent, had no issues, and he just looked to be enjoying it and not worrying too much about the riders around him, which is the right mentality to have when you're racing the EMX. The only regret really is he somehow didn't win an overall moto or an overall event. That's probably the one regret, but it certainly wasn't for lack of trying, that's for sure. And I believe he'll be riding for JM Honda in the MX250 Championship next year, all still to be confirmed. But if that is the case, that's certainly a good ride going into 2022, and he'll be one to keep an eye on. I feel like with his size, he should be able to adapt to the 250 pretty quickly.
Yeah, he's very talented, very loose in the bike, so I think he'll definitely be a good one to watch. And that's the thing about British riders doing EMX125 and these classes, it puts you on the map for international teams as well, and not just kind of relying on a British team to take you there, which there isn't as many British teams as you would probably like doing the full series.
Yeah, it's a pity there isn't, because they need to be racing this championship in order to progress and improve for the future. At the end of the day, these are GP tracks, and these are the tracks that they'll be riding when they make that step to EMX250, MX2, or MXGP, which is the ultimate goal. But obviously a shout out to the GRT Whole Shot KTM team, because they've got Ollie Columber, and I think he'll be doing the full series next year. So
yeah,
he'll be one to keep an eye on. Yeah, exactly.
Now, we had the Coonan brothers. Sasha was unbelievable, except then he kept crashing and got hurt in the end. His raw speed was pretty phenomenal. Once he learns to keep it on two wheels, he's going to be out of this world, I think. But Lucas Coonan, he actually was the one that got hurt at the first round, so we couldn't really see what he had till a couple of rounds in. But once he got his flow going, he became the dominant rider, winning the last four motos of the year, up to third in the championship, and probably a case of wondering what could have been if he hadn't got injured at the start of the year. Really, really impressive. And Sasha probably has even more speed than that.
Yeah, I mean, coming into the year, I wasn't sure in terms of speed who would be close to Lada or Osterhagen, but I have to say, the Coonan, especially Lucas Coonan at the end of the year, wow, he was phenomenal the way he ended that season. So big potential there, and it should be a big future. I do believe Lucas will be racing the MX250 next year, which is probably the right decision, because he's a little bit bigger than Sasha. But Sasha will be on the EMX125 class again, so hopefully he can figure out how to keep it in two wheels, and if he does that, good luck everyone else.
Pretty much. And for Lucas, he's pretty much proven himself on a 125 now anyway. Once he won that first moto in Trentino, the 3 rounds to go, he only lost one moto the rest of the season. So that once he realised he could win and had the confidence, he was pretty much unbeatable from there, which is pretty impressive, and it shows the potential he has. So I think definitely 250, keep an eye on this kid. Also his wee brother, he has unbelievable speed, as you said. Definitely think it's a good idea to keep him in 125 for another year to see if he can just calm down a bit before he goes on a 2-stroke or 4-stroke, because he isn't the tallest either. So both of these kids are one to watch. I did see the one to go supercross racing in America, but we'll probably need a few more years in Europe and EMX classes and probably MX2 before they're ready to really know whether they want to make that step or not. But talent-wise, these two should be able to do whatever they want if they can remain injury-free.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, and it's 2 more talents coming from Belgium, coming at the right time, you would have to say, with Strijbis just quitting, Jeremy van Hoorbeek not getting any younger.
But who
looking
is?
around, looking around in terms of the younger generation, the Belgians, there's not too many, but these two definitely. This is good if you're a Belgian fan, that's for sure. You maybe for a few years there you were worried about the future, but you've got these two in Everton. If they develop and progress the way we expect them to, the future should be in good hands, along with Gertz as well, of course.
Yeah, Belgium are now looking like they can throw back the years to the 90s and early 2000s when they had a strong, really, really strong kind of world class trio of riders. Give the Coonans another couple of years to their MX2, and I think Belgium will have Gertz, Everts, and the Coonan brothers at least. And those four are gonna probably put Belgium back on the map. You would imagine start challenging for Des Nations wins again.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, and who knows? But let's just see how it plays out. But obviously, injuries can play a big part in this sport. But all being well, they can stay injury free, make the right decisions along the way, and yeah, certainly with what they showed this year, very, very talented. That's for sure.
Kai Kosmaker's fourth overall, a consistent year for Kai. I thought maybe at the end he would be able to step it up a wee bit to try and go with Lada and Bruce. He was never far away from the championship actually because he was so consistent. Couldn't quite do it at the end to really get involved in that championship. But fourth overall, Coonan pipped him at the post there in the last couple of rounds. But still a decent season for the Dutchman.
Yeah, he started well, and then towards the end, he sort of didn't ride with the same flow as he did at the start of the year. And obviously, those kind of hard pack tracks are his weaknesses. But I feel like it'll make him this season will have made him a better rider. And obviously, he has a new chapter going into next year. He'll be moving into the EMX250 championship. He says he prefers that bike more. So hopefully, he can have a solid season next year and can see what he can do. But overall, a solid season. It was just important for him to stay injury free, I feel, this year because injuries had been following him around for so many years. At least he's healthy and he can walk away with his head held high this season, and hopefully he can have an exciting future now on the 250.
Now, Ivano van Erp, halfway through this year, something clicked. I think he said in an interview on GateDrop actually that he just got more comfortable on the bike. He got the settings, he got himself sorted halfway through the year, and by the end he was absolutely flying. A couple of crashes and stuff having to come from the back, but when he started at the front, my goodness, he had some speed and some unbelievable corner speed as well. What a revelation he's been this year.
Absolutely, he knows how to throw that bike around, doesn't he? Really, really great to watch. Very exciting, and you can just tell he rides with his heart on his sleeve. Now that the odd time that did leave the crashes, but you know what? I wouldn't even worry because he had so many good results to go with the odd bad motor here or there. But like you said, the first couple of rounds weren't great for him. But I'm not sure what he done over the break. But he came out swinging, and on the times it's just blistering speed really. So
Yeah.
I do believe he'll stay in this championship next year, which I feel like is the right decision because he's small. And if you put him on a 250 now, you know, he could sink. So I think it's a good decision. And I feel like he'll go in possibly as the favourite next year. Maybe only Conan as the other.
If those two get the start, that's going to be a red hot pace between those two riders. That's going to be unbelievable next year.
It's going to be great to watch. I'm sort of glad there's a few staying in the class next year, because it'll make it very competitive at the front, and also the 85 riders moving up to 125 next year will be able to learn off a few of them as well.
Yeah, so get ready for a hot pace in EMX125 next year. Anyone else caught your eye from the championship this season that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, I feel like it was a solid season for Scott Smulders, 6th overall on the BT Husqvarna. Now it's time for him to move to the 250 class next year. We still don't know what he's doing, but he's a pretty big fella, so he could suit that bike better. And Carlos Reslus, the Latvian, he came into the season injured. He actually missed the opening round, but he seemed to get better and better on the MJC Yamaha. Finished 7th in the championship after some good rides towards the end of the season. Now his brother will be moving up from the 85 class to the 125 championship next year. So keep an eye on those two brothers battling it out. It should be good, and it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top. And the last one for me really is Antoine Rossi.
He had some good rides.
Yeah, maybe not the most consistent, but I feel like it was a very good breakout year for him. Finishing 8th in the championship. So next year the goal will be to finish in at least the top 5 and try and win some motos.
Yeah, he definitely showed that when he got a good gate and got out front. He knew how to win races and,
Yeah.
and run up there. So those sort of
ano-
riders are keen to watch next year.
Another one from me actually is Kaz Volk. I forgot about him. Towards the end of the season, his starts are very good, but he was sick, so he was dropping back quite a bit. But if he has a good off season and can get healthy, he's certainly one to watch because his speed was very impressive, I thought, at the end of the season.
So just looking ahead to next season, we've already spoken a bit about Koonin, Sasha Koonin and Ivano Van Erp. Anyone else you want to let people know to keep an eye on? Anybody coming up from the EMX85 class? What do you think?
Yeah.
Can be straight at the front?
Well, it's always difficult to say if they're going to be straight at the front because sometimes rookies need a year, and that's perfectly fine. But the kid Marek from Czech Republic is definitely one to keep an eye on. I think he done a couple towards the end of the year and did score points, so he's one to keep an eye on. And Reslus is one to keep an eye on.
Yes,
I think
he's going to be good.
he done a couple towards the end of the year, and did he get second in a motor, or am I making that up?
Well, his
He
brother, I think, was up front. He actually had some good rides at the end of this year as well.
Yeah, no, he did. He finished second in a moto at Trentino 2. So for him just to step on and finish second, that'll give him a lot of belief heading into the off season. So and then another one to keep an eye on, not a rookie, but Alexis Furry. Alexis Furry, who was a fill-in rider for Fantic, but don't know if he's going to stay there next year. But he was pretty much an unknown, and he was getting plenty of top 10 results. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do as well. And lastly, Lottie Von Dronin, I believe she'll be doing the full round, so she's definitely one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and she qualified incidentally at the end of the year there, so that's a good indicator for her progression as well. Not easy to do that when you're straight off in 85, but she got into the main thing. So the main race is, again, a learning experience for her. And you said the EMX 85 guys, some guys are small and maybe take growth spurts in a couple of years, so it's quite hard to gauge just who'll do what coming in, but it's always an exciting part of what that EMX125 championship is.
Absolutely, I can't wait for it. Obviously, thankfully, it's not too long of an off season this year with MXGP and MX2, we believe, getting underway at the end of February. It'll probably be March or April time before the EMX championships kick off, but bring it on.
Yep. Anything else you want to add that you've observed this season in EMX?
Not really. I think I've said my piece. What about you? Do you want to hit me with anything?
EMX two-stroke again. Brad Anderson just couldn't quite get it this year, but he still put up a pretty good fight at 40 years old.
He did indeed, and those two Fantics are fast, Max Spies and Federico Tuani. Young, they have the experience, or young, and they have the speed. As Paul Mallon says, 110 years old Brad Anderson wasn't too far away.
No.
But hopefully we'll still see him do the odd race here or there next year.
That's it. Right, Andy, thanks very much for your input. We'll be back with an MXGP review in a few days, possibly next week. That one will come out. But that's the EMX wrap-up for 2021. And so we're already looking forward to what next year we'll have in store. And as we mentioned, it isn't the longest wait this time, because considering it's already the middle of November. And